Welcome to Top to Bottom Male Romance Podcast, where we celebrate all things male romance. I am Jessica.
And I'm Markie.
And this is our exciting June top episode. We were lucky enough to have Sloane Kennedy on for an interview, and we will get to that soon. But first,
just real fast, because this is now the thing I do, I wanted to remind everybody that we have reader groups, both on Facebook through our Top to Bottom podcast page and on Goodreads. You can jump in and discuss our bottom picks every month, or tell us about a new series we should read, recommend things to us and everyone else. You watched a cool movie, picked up a good comic book series, anything that pertains to male romance, you can jump in and let us know about it. Also, we do have a Patreon set up to where you guys could go and support us that way. Our patrons also get the inside scoop on who's going to be on our show and are able to submit author questions when we have that information available. So definitely go check it out.
Another thing everybody should do is go and give us reviews on whatever you listen to us on iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or whatever you find us on, because it helps other people find us too.
Indeed. Before we get into our Sloane Kennedy interview, we wanted to talk about some other fun stuff. First off, since it's our top episode, we have a new fresh banana. Our fresh banana for the month of June is Crystal Lacey. Crystal actually was one of the authors who participated in our Easter egg hunt in April, so she's already awesome. She writes contemporary romance, male romance, of course, and she actually has two series on a platform called Radish, which is kind of unique because it's not the traditional way that stories are released. Basically, the way it's set up, which is really cool, is the authors on Radish release their stories in like episodes or chapters, essentially. So you can go on and read one or two chapters at a time, and you can either wait for them to be released after a couple weeks, I think, typically, or you can pay a couple bucks and get them a little bit faster, which is kind of cool. So if you want to go check out these books, you can. And if it's, a gripping story, you just can't wait for the allotted time, you can toss a couple dollars and get the next chapter, which is really cool and interesting. But she's got two serials going on right now. Brave for You is apparently one that's going to be releasing through the summer, and then A Season for Change is her other one. So I will make sure to put the link for her Radish profile on there, so you can go on and go directly to those books and check them out. But it's really cool. Definitely worth taking a peek.
You were reading something else. It was from Kajia Bacon. You said that you had just plowed through them. Tell me about that.
I did. And we brought it up a little bit on our Facebook Live thing that happened last week about these books. And I'll go ahead and mention it again. One of the ways that I found her is she was also one of the other authors who participated in our Easter egg hunt. So there's that. So she was already on my radar. But she had just recently posted pictures of these badass little keychains that she got made of her main characters from her Order series. And her Order series are about two extremely hot elves. So I was already hooked on it. But when I saw these keychains, I was like, oh shit, now I have to go read all of these so I have an excuse to buy these amazing keychains. Of course, I dove headfirst into The Mutt, which is the first one, and loved it. Like, I love the characters. The world building's awesome. Her elf characters aren't the typical slight, more magically inclined elves. There's one of them is an assassin, and he's a super badass. And the other one's like this cocksure, cool archer guy who just like knows what he's doing all the time. And man, I immediately adored it. And her world building on the Order series is really interesting because she weaves in kind of the way that the world is set up as far as how the magic system goes, because apparently the main character, who is an archer, he's a dark elf, but his mother was like struck by a spell or something when she was pregnant, so he has different colored hair than he's supposed to. It's man, I freaking love it. And of course, the sex scenes, of course, are fabulous, so I definitely recommend it. The first two books, The Mutt and The Highlander, are already out, and I read them within like 2 hours of each other because I just had to absorb all of it into my veins. The next one, 21 Arrows Salute, comes out June 11th, so just around the corner, but I had to bring it up because I really loved this series, so I highly recommend them.
Awesome. I really hate it when you give me more stuff to read.
Oh, I know. This was another situation where I finished it and texted you and was like, this series. You're like, shut up, dude.
And by hate it, I mean, I totally love it. I just hate the fact that I don't have more time.
Oh, yeah,
but
I know.
Luckily, that sounds bite-sized, so I'll probably
they're really good, and they're not very, they're not dense, which is nice. So they're good, sit down, kill a couple hours on the couch kind of read, and you just, as soon as you get done with the Highlander, you're going to be counting down the days for 21 Arrow Salute because it's good shit. I really liked it.
Well, probably wait till after we finish this month's bottom picks just so I can make sure I get it all done. But that maybe you'll mean is it'll all be out.
Yes, that's probably even better.
Yes.
Back in our last episode, we actually had mentioned that we wanted to get some good recommendations for some impreg books, since it's not a genre that either one of us has really dabbled into. And listener Katie actually sent us a message recommending the Holland Brothers series by Tony Griffin. And reading the synopsis of the books, they actually seem pretty interesting. So we're definitely going to be adding it to our to-read pile, but we wanted to share just in case somebody else out there was interested in getting into a good impreg series. So we wanted to give that shout out.
And another thing, I can't do this episode without mentioning, anybody who follows us knows that we're both super nuts about TJ Klune, and we're very excited about his new book, Raven Song, coming out. And he has started this 8-week-long post thing that he's doing. You can follow it either on his Facebook page or go to his website, which is tjklunebooks.com. And he's talking about Raven Song and, the writing process and various things about the series, and it's really awesome.
Yeah.
He says he's going to be dropping some little minor taste test spoiler kind of things, and includes that happens in the first post he does, but it's really great. And if you're interested in TJ Klune and Raven Song, or if you've read Wolf Song or anything like that, go and check it out. Super awesome stuff. So that's going to be something every single week. He's going to be giving us something to look forward to. So our bottom pick is Unbroken from the Protector series. It's number 12 in Sloane Kennedy's Protector series. Mm-hmm. So that is going to be what we are reading this month. I guess without further ado, we should go ahead and jump into our interview.
Yeah. All right. So joining us today is Sloane Kennedy. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into the questions. And what we tend to always start with is what got you into male-male romance?
So I remember one of the books that kind of introduced me as a reader to it. I can't remember the author exactly. I want to say her name was Lorelei Hart or something like that. She had this cowboy type series that I was a big fan of, and it was a long series. And so I got to a book where two of the characters, a man and a woman, were married, and the plot of the book was that this guy returns to town or comes to town to see the other guy because they used to be in a relationship. And that was kind of my first true exposure to two guys together. And I have to say, it was just so intense and incredible that I was just, every scene that they were together, I was completely hung up and caught up on the scenes. But the other scenes between the man and the woman were just kind of blah and okay. And it ended up being a menage story where they all three get together. But that it was so forbidden to me mentally, like, because I'd never experienced anything like that I was like, wow, I got to check this out. And so I just started dabbling around a little. And I think a lot of books, had that threesome dynamic. And it took a while to find, a book that had just the two men. And then once I think like most readers, once I had started that, I was hooked. And it was really pretty much impossible to go back. So when I started writing a few years ago, it didn't even occur to me. It didn't even pass my brain that I could write something like that. I just thought, I could only write something traditional, and I was looking to pay the bills. So I wrote a few MFs, and then I got to Logan's Need. As I was planning his book and trying to figure out what kind of woman he'd end up with, I was just like, I don't know, who do I give him to, and who'd be the perfect woman? And then Dom just like popped in my head. And he had been a very small secondary character in the previous book that I had no intention of him, when I started writing him, having him come back and be a main character. But when I made that connection towards the end of that book, Shane's Fall, then I was like, oh my goodness, he'd be perfect. And then I'm like, can I really do this? And I just kind of debated with myself. But once the idea was there, I just had to try, and I had absolutely nothing to lose. And so I wrote it, and I was like, just had the best time ever. And I actually struggled with my next MF book, which I'd already planned the way I'd written Logan's book. So I wrote one more MF after that. And then after that, it was just MM all the way. And I have written one more MMF since then, just this past winter. But yeah, definitely, I don't have any intention of going back. And I'm very happy that I just kind of stumbled into the whole thing.
Well, we're very glad that you stumbled into it. So when you look for a book, what sort of protagonists do you love? And do you have a favorite genre or subgenre?
Protagonists are probably similar to what I write, which is the big alpha guy, and then the guy who may not be as physically strong. I like stories where there's a lot of conflict, where one or both men are trying to avoid any kind of relationship, avoid even any kind of, contact, sexual contact, what have you. So I think those are my favorite. I do like these. So, a lot of people call them those tropes. I do like the idea of the gay for you trope, where one guy doesn't even, realize that he might have sexual feelings for another man. And so he has to go through that experience. So I like those stories as well. So I do tend to lean more towards contemporary books. I wouldn't say I have any particular favorite subgenres. I don't read as much as I used to. I actually, because I've been moving and stuff, I used to read before I started writing. I'd read probably like a book a day type thing. So I was a very avid reader. Once I started writing, that slowed down. But recently, it's since about January, because I started moving into this new house, I literally had not read a book. Besides doing some beta reading for Lucy Lennox, I had not read any books since January. And so finally last weekend, I think last Saturday or 2 Saturdays ago, I found the time to read 2 books. And that's been it. So I feel like I haven't had the chance to necessarily explore as much as I'd like either in terms of different subgenres. There are a couple that I don't care for as much, so I'll tend to avoid them. But I can't say there's any that I kind of seek out. So I'm pretty open to most kinds, except for things. I'm not a huge paranormal fan, for example, but I have read some MPreg, and I will read those if the plot sounds interesting. So it just really, I guess I'm pretty open to lots of things and have very little on my hard limit list, if you want to call it that.
Gotcha. Well, I definitely understand not being able to read as much because, you come out with so many books so fast. Like, it feels like every time I turn around, you have another book coming out. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have to keep up with all of these because I love them so much.
Thank you. Yeah, every time I think I'm going to give myself a break, I'm like just itching to get back to the computer. So, because I told myself this year, you don't need to put as many books out. But I think writing has turned into some kind of therapy for me that I have to have it rather than, it's work and I have to do it. It's more like I need to get back into that fictional world because that fictional world is way better than reality most of the time. So,
well, speaking of having a bunch of books coming out, your newest book in the Protector series, Unbroken, it's our bottom pick for the month of June. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and what readers can look forward to?
Sure. So Unbroken is book number 12 in the Protector series, which just boggles my mind because I never even imagined there'd be that many books, and the demand is there that there will continue to be more books. So Unbroken is about Alex and Vaughn, and you actually met Alex back in Atonement, which is book 6, and that came out in like January of last year. So it's been even a little bit over a year since that story came out. So I actually recommend to people who maybe want to start with Unbroken, if they haven't read any of the other books, to maybe at least read Atonement, because Atonement is the story of Alex's brother, and Alex does come into the story of Atonement near the end. So it's kind of and Dante plays a big role in Unbroken as well. So it's kind of a good idea to read them both. But anyhow, Unbroken is basically the story of Alex. It takes place 2 years after he is rescued from the world of child sex trafficking. He was kidnapped when he was 8, I believe, and held for all those years. In the story, he's 20, so he's rescued when he's 18 by his brother, Dante, and then Dante's lover, Magnus, and then Vaughn, who is this mysterious character who actually worked for the man who was holding Alex prisoner. So he's the one who got Alex out. And so the story, I had a lot of readers angry with me when I did the little snippet at the end of the previous book, because I had basically, it's 2 years later and Alex is trying to get his life back together, and he's having some issues, but he's kind of hiding them well, and he's trying to be brave and go outside and live a normal life. And so what I had happen was he gets abducted in that very first scene. And then he gets rescued by Vaughn, but does he actually get rescued? And so the very last little bit of that scene has, Alex begging Vaughn to take him home back to Dante. Vaughn basically tells him no. And so I leave it at that. So when I wrote that snippet at the end of the previous book, people had a couple of months to chew on, what the hell is Vaughn doing? So Vaughn has a lot of haters going into this book. So obviously when you read the book, you do get the answers to all those questions and more. So it's basically about Alex, going back into that life and how he gets through it. And it's mostly his journey and his emotional growth and acceptance that maybe his life isn't as normal as he would have liked to pretend that it was.
Well, I was definitely one of those readers that at the end of it with the snippet and the unanswered questions, I was like biting my nails waiting for this book to come out. So I'm pretty excited that we were able to pick it for our bottom.
Well, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. Most people seem to enjoy the story, and it went in a direction that I think most people weren't really expecting, but I think I was able to give them all the different elements that they were hoping for.
Awesome. So within your Protector series, you bring up some pretty heavy subject matter like abuse and mental illness. You also did a panel about this in GRL 2017, which we talked about on a previous episode. Why is bringing these issues into your work so important?
So that's a really good question, because I actually, with this recent book, I got several reviews, where I get criticized for having this be a recurring theme in my books. And it always makes me think about, why do I do it? Because there's always this question of, am I exploiting the topic just to get certain feels out of it or what have you? And, I have to dig deep and really think about that, because I do have quite a few books that deal with, abuse, sexual assault, mental illness. And, the reality is that the type of person that I am, I have more of a darker outlook on life. I think it was the way that my younger years were. Fortunately, I was never sexually abused in any way, shape, or form, but I have been through some emotional abuse. I've dealt with some issues like depression, and I am a self-harmer, which I'm very open about with people in my books and such. So I've had some things I've had to deal with. And so when I think about, my 20s, I was someone who was very alone. And that was the hardest part of dealing with, in that particular case, the depression, because I didn't feel like I had anyone. Even though I had family and friends, there was no one I felt like I could talk to about it. And it felt like there was no escape from that world. When I started writing, I started including some of these darker topics that would elicit those same emotions of being alone and scared and not sure what the future held. And I did that because I wanted people to see that they are not alone, because that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges of any kind of mental illness is accepting that you are, in fact, struggling with something. Because when I was going through that, I just kept telling myself I should be able to get over this. I'm not really sick. I'm fine. I just need to get out more and do things and whatever. So I like to show people those same emotions that I, as a writer, have experienced, that other characters experience those things, with the hopes that those individuals see that they are not alone. Additionally, I go into the darker topics like abuse against children, because I think that's another subject that isn't addressed enough, and that people who struggle with that are going to be people who don't necessarily talk about it. It's something they keep to themselves. They're ashamed of it. So when they read in these books that there are these characters who are starting to overcome these things, no, they'll never have, necessarily a normal life per se, but they start to overcome all these things and they deal with the emotions. If someone sees that, hey, I have those same emotions, those same fears, those same hopes, then they feel less alone. And maybe that's something that will spur them to talk to someone about it. So when I get these criticisms that I use that topic too much, after I dig down and decide that, no, I don't, it's okay to do this, then I take the approach of how much is, too much? Why is there a too much when it comes to something like sexual abuse? I think it's something that has to be out there to give victims the ability to see that they do have a life beyond, that attack or those moments in their childhood or younger years when they felt like they didn't have any hope. And I get plenty of emails and feedback from people who thank me because I made them feel something that they hadn't felt safe to feel before, and that they have been through those things. And you know what? Those things are very real. As I was writing Unbroken, there's actually a mention in there of a network of men who go in, who try to rescue these kids. I actually saw a story on the news after I'd written that part of the book. There is an actual task force made of ex-military and ex-cops who volunteer their time to go in and try to get these kids out. So these are very real topics, and I just don't feel like you can ever talk about those too much. So to those readers who, get tired of it, I do try to intersperse other books that don't maybe have that such intense subject matter, but I will continue to write those stories because those stories need to be told. And most people, if they read the trigger warnings, they read the blurb, they're going to know, or if they're fans of the series, they're going to know whose stories are going to have those types of subjects. And they shouldn't be reading them if they're at a point where they feel like it's just a bit too much for them. And I'm absolutely okay with that. So in any case, that's why those issues are really important to me, because I think they need a voice, and not a lot of people necessarily want to talk about those things, but I think a lot of people need to hear them and need to be able to curl up with a book and get lost in that world and not feel alone, for however many hours it takes them to get through that story. Sorry, that was kind of a long answer.
It was great. I was excited to ask you that because during the panel you expressed it so well that I wanted to give you a chance to answer it again so people could hear it who weren't able to be at that panel, because I love your answer. It's such a good response to it, and I agree 100% with everything. Like I feel like these topics are important and they do need a voice, and the way that you weave them into the story is always done powerfully, but also, tactfully, and the way that the characters recover from things. You don't make it like magically they're better one day. It's a slow process, and I love it. So I had to ask you again, so you could tell that answer again.
I also want to add to that with the mental illness part of it. I think it's really awesome that you include that, because it's for people who don't experience anything like that. I think getting it into our entertainment media, that it normalizes it, makes people realize that it's a lot more prevalent than they might realize. And I think that's really awesome that you address that and do it in such a real way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's got such a bad stigma. And I think especially with men, they're supposed to always be strong and they can't be vulnerable and show emotion and any kind of weakness, and I think that's a ridiculous concept and to expect anyone, so yeah, I totally agree with that.
So maybe kind of taking it in a different direction here, you have a ton of books, a ton of them. If you had to choose one to be adapted into a movie, what would it be?
So that one would be hard, just because I would love to see so many of them come to life. So I think I'd have a hard time picking between two. So Locked in Silence, I think, would make a great movie, just because there's that dynamic, the one character not being able to verbally communicate. The audiobook is basically going to be the closest thing to a movie, but you still have that incredible, you still hear everything in the internal dialogue of the one character, and you see it in the way the two characters interact. So the things that Dallas might not be able to say, are the things that Nolan can read just by looking at expressions. And so I think that would make a really incredible movie, just because I think it would be so incredibly different. And then I'd probably have to go with Logan's Need. If I'd be forced to choose, Logan's Need would be another one I'd struggle to not want to make into film, just because the two guys, there's something between the two guys, between Dom and Logan, that just has always clicked. And even though some people didn't care for certain aspects of the story, like, Sylvie's role in it, there's something there that's just there. And I think because they're kind of my flagship couple and they're the start of it all and they keep coming back into other stories, I think that I'd love to see them on screen. I actually used inspiration pics, and one of the guys, which I didn't realize when I picked his picture, he's a guy from a show called Prison Break or something, but he has that perfect look for Dom, how I would envision him in real life. So I just think the dynamic between the two characters, the way they hurt each other over and over again, but keep coming back to one another, would be really interesting to see. And then just Logan's struggle with accepting who he really is, and that the things he had planned in his life were not the things he actually needed. So it's an emotional book that I think would be really interesting to watch play out on a big screen.
Yeah, I would definitely love to see Locked in Silence as a movie, because I love that book, and that would be interesting to see that played out and how they would have to work that into cinema. So that's a good pick.
Thank you.
So what is your typical writing process? Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I am absolutely a pantser. So it's funny because I'm going through this process now, because I actually haven't started on the next Pelican Bay book. I told myself I would start last week, but I've bought a couple horses, and they're turning out to just be a lot more time consuming than I realized. And so I just haven't had the time like I used to at where I used to live. I'd just go into my office, and I never had any visitors, and I could just sit there all day in my pajamas. I didn't have to shower for days if I didn't want to, and I could just disappear into my fictional world. But So where I live now, I have a little barn and my sister has a couple horses too. So people are over every single day. And so there isn't that where I can just go escape to my little writing cave and start doing things because I'm bound to get interrupted or I'm expected to come out to the barn and what have you. So I'm struggling a bit like with Cam and Ford's story where usually when I go in, at least when I sit down, I have that opening scene already in my head and I have other scenes in my head. But with this one, for example, I've got nothing. So when I open Word after we're done here, I've got nothing. A lot of times, though, what will happen is I will just open that and I'll start thinking and then I'll just start typing and it just comes flowing out of me. Like with Unbroken, I hadn't written in more than a month. I had the same panicked feeling of like, oh God, what if I can't come up with anything? And I think it was Easter Sunday, I wrote 8,000 words in one day and I had to stop to go to, family dinner. So I always do that to myself where I think there's no way I'm going to be able to just sit down and have it come pouring out. But lo and behold, every single time it does. So I'm very fortunate in that sense. I usually have a handful of larger scenes picked out and a general plot idea, but things actually do change quite a bit. There's something that happened in Unbroken, a scene that popped up that I literally had no plans. And I actually, I think when I was done with it, I sent a comment to Lucy and I said, oh my God, what the F did I just write? Because it was like not even planned and this character just did this. And I'm like, okay, can I incorporate this and make it work? And so definitely a pantser. And a lot of times I don't even have control of it. It's like something in my head just clicks on and I am gone. And then, the characters are taking over. So it's cool, but it's also a little intimidating because it's harder up until I sit down at that keyboard to know that something's going to be there when I do in fact sit down. So
it definitely seems to be working.
It does so far. Let's hope that continues because I don't know what I'm going to do when I hit the inevitable wall of writer's block. Let's hope that never happens.
Are there any genres that you haven't written before that you would be interested in trying?
I doubt it. The only thing I've been doing a little bit, and it's funny how readers get very possessive over certain aspects of what you write. So I've tried a little bit with my 2 novellas, Discovering Daisy and Protecting Elliot, I've tried a little bit more. I don't call it BDSM because I just don't think that's what it is. I call it, domination and submission, basically where just the characters are a bit more dominant than is maybe more typical of an alpha male. I'm not a fan of BDSM, especially the part with restraints or the beatings, the whips, and stuff. And even though I've read plenty of those, it's just not something I would ever want to write for myself. So it's this sadomasochism part of BDSM, I guess. Is that what it is? BDSM?
Yeah, BDSM, that's right.
Or bondage and... Okay. So I like the domination because I like the idea of someone trusting enough to give up that amount of control. So I've played around with that in a couple of books. And I wouldn't mind writing a full-length book where that comes into play a little bit more. But again, like I said, readers they get really nervous and they'll actually ask me if a book is going to be BDSM. And so I have to be a little bit careful, even though I will always write for myself first. If I'm going to cross over that line, a couple things have to happen. I have to have done my research and really understand that entire lifestyle. And number 2, I'd probably put it into a book that was outside a series because the Protectors, for example, are pretty well known and people even get antsy when I do an MFF. So if I stick a woman in there, they get pretty antsy about it. So anything where I explored a different genre, I do it outside an existing series. So I'm actually going to write, hopefully this summer sometime, MMMM, so 4 men, but I'm going to do that as a complete standalone. So that way people who, are in love with a series don't feel like they're missing out, but then they can choose to read this separate book if it intrigues them enough. I have lots of people who don't like threesomes, and so they'll skip over those in the Protectors books or the other series. But they will leave comments like, I wish they weren't in here because I don't like them, but I feel like then I miss storylines. And so it's, it's just this line of how much can you put into an existing series? So if I were to explore other genres, I guess that would probably be the only one. I don't have the ability to write like a paranormal. I don't have the world building ability. So I have to kind of stick with what I enjoy and what I'm good at this point. But I do really enjoy trying new characters. So like Isaac is a good example from the second Pelican Bay book. He is a character that I'd never written before I don't know if I feel like I'm kind of giving away too much information, but basically he, dresses in the women's lingerie. And that was something like I had never even considered before. And then I saw some pictures and thought it was really sexy, and it made me wonder why a man might want to do that. So I try to explore things like that. I don't know that they're necessarily genres, but just different characteristics that may not be the standard. I try to explore those, but then want to be really sensitive. I was talking to an author about doing like a gender fluid type character. And that's something where I'm not sure I'd have the understanding to write a story like that. If I did, it would definitely require a great deal of research, because something like that needs a lot of sensitivity and accuracy when you write something like that. So kind of another long-winded answer, but for the most part, I don't see myself writing any other genres, but I do try to continue to challenge myself with different characters that are just a little bit outside, the mold that I started off with when I first began writing these stories.
Awesome. Well, and you mentioned before with this next question that you don't get a chance to read a ton, but do you have a favorite author or series, or what do you like to read, either romance or outside the genre?
So I really only do read romance at this point. When I started writing, I tried to stick with a few favorite MF authors, but just didn't manage it. Obviously, I'm a fan of Lucy Lennox because I collaborate with her. Her books I just really like. She's just got such talent when it comes to writing. And I'm lucky enough that I get to beta read for her, so it's easier in the sense of finding the time. The other author that I do, and I haven't had time to read her latest book, is Cara D. I've read all of her books. Really enjoy those. Quite a few of them have that darker element that I like. So I don't have, like I said, a lot of time to actually, I think when I started, I had more favorite authors. Like this question would have been easy to answer, but because I haven't read necessarily as much as I used to, I don't have those single authors that I can just rattle off like most readers probably can. So just because I haven't kept up with much reading, I'd say in the last year, I've read maybe 10 books, total. So that's pretty bad, but yeah, I guess there's nothing I can do. It's either, write. And I also go through phases. I was telling one of I do read the Unbreakable series by Rinda and Jocelyn. I've read all those, and I've got their two new ones. I've read Psycho Romy, and I've got their two new ones on my TBR, but I'm a fan of theirs. And I was talking to Rinda about the fact that I go through these phases where it's really bizarre. I'll sit and watch the same movie in bed night after night, like for weeks at a time. And usually I'm playing on my iPad, like Words with Friends with my friend. And that's what I do. Those are my nights. So instead of reading, which I could be doing, I've got the TV going, even though I'm not really watching. And then I'm just playing on my iPad or going through Facebook and answering posts and stuff like that. So I have these weird phases where it just, that's what I do. So the movie I'm watching now is called Knowing. It's from like maybe 5 or 6 years ago with Nicolas Cage. And it's one of those end of the world type movies. And yeah, I just play it every night and then just sit and do other stuff while it's running. So I have some weird quirks.
I don't think that sounds all that weird, actually.
Yeah, it's not what I used to do. I used to have reading binges where I'd read for weeks at a time. Oh, I am currently reading my own books when I can find the energy, only because I'm trying to make sure I don't copy character names, and also because Lucy and I are doing the crossover between the Protectors and the Maid Marian books. So I'm trying to catch up with all of my different Protectors that we might want to bring into that book. So I'm just trying to do a little bit of catch up on some of the later books. Interestingly enough, it turns out I use the guy's name, Jimmy, as a bad guy name quite a bit. So I definitely need to keep track of that stuff more, because luckily I haven't used the same last name, but Jimmy turns out to be a name I don't like, and I make him a bad guy every time. So
that's hilarious.
I love that.
Also, side note, I'm really excited about that collaboration, like the crossover between the two, because we're also fans of Lucy here because she's amazing, and y'all's writing styles when you collaborate is fantastic. So I can't wait to see those two universes merge.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to I'm just having all these visions of, Aunt Tilly and her girls. And, we were talking about Little Naked Leo, the trouble they could just get into. And then you've got the big buff, Ronin type guys who are always serious. And then you've got, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we've got just so many opportunities to have both a lot of emotion going on with the storyline, but also a lot of just fun. And I, as a reader, I love going back and seeing, those characters and watching just their normal family life after they've had their HEA. So I think everybody, loves seeing that. So I think it'll just be a chance to give little snippets into different, protector characters and marrying characters to see what they're up to a certain amount of time later. So yeah, it's going to be fun.
So where can future fans find you?
Okay, so I'm not giving out my address so people can stalk me at my house. I've got a website, which is pretty simple, sloanekennedy.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram and Pinterest. And side note, for those of you who liked Isaac's whole dress-up thing, there's some hot pictures on Pinterest. I landed in Facebook jail after putting that link in my group. Just putting the link in the group got me thrown into Facebook jail for a week. So anyway, so check out those pictures if that interests you. And then I am doing some signings for those who don't know yet. Be in Amsterdam for Euro Pride Con at the end of June. I'll be in GRL this coming fall. Then 2019, I'm actually going to be in Australia, in Brisbane, and then that'll be in March, and then London the following September. So for those of my international peeps who've been asking for me to come, I'm coming, so hopefully they will be there.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm going to GRL again this year, so I'll make sure to come stalk you there and make you sign more things.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. We were really giddy that you were willing to come on for us because you're amazing. And we know that it's tough to make time sometimes when you write as much as you do, and especially if you're going through moving and horses and all of that stuff. So we really appreciate you making the time to be here with us today.
Well, thank you for asking me. Like I said, this was my first time, and I hope I didn't talk too fast or mumble too much. My sister says I mumble quite a bit, so hopefully everybody could understand what I was saying. So, but yeah, it was fun, and I appreciate all the support. That's always incredible to me that people like yourselves, the bloggers and such, really just, play such an important role in helping authors, especially the newer ones, get the word out about their books. So I'm very appreciative of you even giving me this opportunity.
Well, thank you.
So thank you again, Sloane, for taking the time to speak with us. We had a great time talking to you. It was a wonderful interview. So thank you so much.
And as per usual, we'll be giving away a copy of your choice of any of the Protector books. This includes the latest one, our bottom pick, Unbroken. Awesome thing about Sloane Kennedy's work is that the Protector series is all standalone stuff. You can read them individually, so you can kind of pick where you'd like to go with that. And we'll announce that sometime. We'll announce that at the bottom episode.
Absolutely. So I guess that's it for this episode, and we will catch you guys in our reader groups, and we'll catch you on our bottom episode.
Bye.
Bye.